right? After this story, you will know how it all started, right? Okay, so let's listen to the story about the birth of lean. Okay, Japan. All right. All right. The story goes back to Japan. Okay. Now, you might know, uh, you might have heard that Lee needs to do something with this thing called Toyota. The Toyota, some of you might be driving Toyota vehicles now. Uh, so I'm going to talk to you on this story about the founder of Toyota. His name was Sakichi Toyoda, the person over here. He is known as the greatest inventor in Japan. He's like like a whiz kid, and still today he's considered as the greatest inventor of Japan. Now he was a nice boy. One of the things he did when he was in his youth is he saw his mother struggling to um, do he was doing his mother was weaving wool and preparing fabric, and he found that his mother is spending a lot of hours of doing it, and he went on to create a wooden hand loom, which is this. You might have seen this, people, in the old movies, that people use this wooden hand loom where you push this across, and then the stitching automatically happens. And this is what he first introduced. He is the guy who invented the wooden hand loom. Just seeing how much trouble his mother was going through. A very good son, right? So what happened? He, after and developing, inventing this machine, he went on to perfect this machine over 3 decades. And finally, he came up with a fully automated hand loom machine, which called the Toyota Automatic Loom Type G in 1926. This model over here. And he also went on to establish Toyota Automatic Loom Works in 1927, producing these machines and selling it to other countries. This is where it all started. A guy developing a automatic hand loom machine. Now, he had a son called Kichiro. The guy over here, the guy over here, the same person. Now, Kichiro, like all the other sons, he always was looking at to do something better than the father. And so what Sakichi did in 1921, he sent Kichiro to study in US, because US was known for most of their manufacturing practices, and also he was trying to make some deals for his machine. He sent Kichiro to US on to study and try to do some business development. During that time, what Kichiro got fascinated was seeing the automobiles that US had. When he came back, he told his father, "My entire ambition is, yeah, okay, I'll do your handloom operation, but I really need to build automobile factories in Japan. My vision is to make cars, automobiles, vehicles in Japan." So as a result, he wanted to start an automobile division. Now, what Sakichi, being a father, he did in 1929, he sold some of his patent rights of this machine to a company called Platt Brothers in UK for amount of £100,000. Now, nowadays, a politician would be able to buy some companies. Maybe some of the individuals in this class would say, it's simple, I would have bought that, right? But that's the amount that they sold this patents for. So, Platt Brothers, the money that they got from Platt Brothers of £100,000, Kichiro came back to Japan. When he came back to Japan, he started an engine development division, because if you want to try to do vehicles, first you need to have developed the engines, right? And went on to come up with the first automobile for Toyota, right? Still, it was called Toyota, right? Toyota. This was the original logo of Toyota because it was named after Sakichi's surname. So the first Toyota vehicle was a truck called G1. This is that truck. And then they also, then the truck has a separate logo, which is this one, and this is the Toyota logo, and this is the truck logo. And then they also came up with the first automobile called Toyota AA in 1936, and this was the logo of that. So Toyota is actually, if you know Japan, Japan has three uh, alphabets, right? If you know, there is hiragana, katakana, and kanji. So kanji, in kanji alphabet, in kanji wording, is what Toyota comes from. Now, if you really want to, if you write the word in katakana, the word Toyota is pronounced as Toyota, and it's written like this. In 1937, when they established Toyota Motor Corporation, he went on to establish Toyota Motor Corporation. They wanted to change the name, and after a competition, moving away from the kanji written Toyota, they moved in to write the Toyota name in katakana like this, which pronounced as Toyota. Now, why this name was selected is mainly because in when you're writing this using a Japanese brush, there you generally only takes 8 strokes to write this, and 8 is a lucky number in Japan. So because of that, they opted and changed the name from Toyota to Toyota. Now they were in manufacturing of this, and these trucks uh, was one of the main focus because this was a time Japan went into the Second World War. The Second World War happened from 1939 to September 1945. Why Japan got involved? Hope you know. If you do not know about the Second World War, please watch. There's a series called Second or the Second World War in Color. You can watch that in YouTube, and if you have Netflix, you can watch a high definition series in Netflix. Very interesting. It tells you why a lot of things happened during that time. So during the wartime, because of Japan started supplying these trucks to the military, but there was a huge problem because there was no access for material, and moreover there was no access for people because they could not afford the high skill resources like what US had, and most of the people were moved on to different sections. So this truck started giving a lot of issues because of that. They, because of the money issues, they reduced these, even these headlights into one headlight. Right? So they had started facing a lot of issues and complaints. They were getting a lot of complaints with regard to their truck. So as a result, Kichiro, who visited US, sees the how US works. Especially he have seen how this moving line operation works. When he visited, he wrote a guideline called Inspection and Improvement Regulation by Kichiro Toyota in 1939. This is one of the founding documents for development of Toyota production system, which later became lean. Got to know as lean. Okay, so moving on, uh, 1929 is where Sakichi sold this, and soon after Sakichi actually dies. So Kichiro was given the responsibility to carry on Toyota's operation. Now, what happened in 1950s? Toyota faces huge challenges. These challenges are due to labor issues. The people started rioting, and Toyota Motor Company comes into a bit of a problem. So, as a result, the founder's son, Kichiro, steps down and hand over its operation to IG IG Toyota, who was his cousin, right? So IG Toyota is the person who from there on takes on the efforts of Toyota Motor Company to what it becomes on as a today. Now, why uh, uh, IG, like Kichiro, IG also what he does, he wants to learn uh, the art of manufacturing from America, because at that time the experts of automobile manufacturing was Americans. Americans was, as you know, also defeated Japan during the war. If you know what happened actually during the Second World War, what ended the Second World War was Japan, Americans' efforts in dropping a plutonium bomb in Nagasaki. And if you know why they had to drop a plutonium bomb in Nagasaki, was the main reason that Japanese fighters was impossible to beat in one-to-one combat, because most of them were suicide soldiers. They, if you have heard of kamikaze fighters, the Japanese Air Force, if they can't take up a target, if they don't have ammunition, they used to crash land into enemy targets and commit suicide. That is where suicide bombing started. So only when the second plutonium bomb, which was dropped in Nagasaki, that Japanese Emperor Hirohito decided to surrender arms. So now, because the war is over, IG had the chance to go back to US and learn more about how to um, learn how the US companies, the big giants, actually manufacturing these automobiles. Now, the biggest giant in that time, like the biggest company during that time that manufactured automobiles, was Ford company, and they had this 2.5 kilometer factory in Michigan called the Ford River Rouge complex. This was like a gigantic factory, and every manufacturer's dream was to go and visit this plant and see how they run. Now, Ford, if you go back to the Ford company in history, it was started by Henry Ford, the person over here, who had a vision of providing a vehicle to everybody in his country. Now, before he came up with mass manufacturing of vehicles, manufacturing of cars was more like craft production. Like one person completely handles the entire production of the vehicle. Tires, engine, everything is done by one person. But he, with the support of many people, many scientists like Ellie Whitney and so many other people, he came up with this moving line assembly where he dedicated specialized people, specialized resources for each of the activities. To build the tires, they had one group. To build the body, they had another group. To build the engine, they had another group. So, and also they were working on a moving assembly line. So where the car gets assembled as it travels through the assembly conveyor. So IG traveled to US like Ichiro to learn how this works in Fort River Rouge complex. And one other thing, now this is Toyota is just recovering from these labor issues. One good thing happened for Toyota was that there was this Korean War that got initiated at that time. Because of the Korean War, the regulations around labor actually got relaxed. Government said employees now can do have to do multitask in their companies. So because of that, their labor issues also got sorted. So the invitation to visit, IG managed to go to US and learn a lot about this just in time. If you know what it is mainly those principles were learned based out of the Ford practices. And the invitation was made to IG by Henry Ford II, who is the grandson of the original Henry Ford. So they actually had an idea of transferring knowledge and trying to do something together. But unfortunately, because of the Korean War situation, that didn't go through. Now, what happened in Korean War? If you don't know what is Korea War, it is the just after the Second World War ended, the Allied forces. Japan was handed over to Allied forces under the leadership of Douglas MacArthur, and then you had the other parts, which is owned by the Chinese, the Manchurians, and so on. They were fighting to territory over Korea. This is the result. What you see, there's two separate nations called North Korea and South Korea. Um, Moving on. So this is a story about Toyota. Now we've coming through the history of Toyota and how it evolved, and now I come to another interesting chapter, an incident that happened during this time, just after the Second World War, who ended in September 1945. In 1946, this person called Ichiro Ishikawa. If you have heard of somebody called Kairo Ishikawa, who is more famous for his fishbone diagram, this is his father, Ichiro Ishikawa. Ichiro Ishikawa got hold of all the scientists and engineers who survived the Second World War and formed a union called Union of Japanese Scientists and Engineers. Right? So as after they formed, as part of it, they started inviting people from, especially from US, to come over and start sharing knowledge with these groups. So in 1950 is when Kenichi Koenagi, then the president of this Union of Japanese Scientists and Engineers, who called JUICE, some people call it JUSE, uh, invited a person called Dr. Edward Deming. Now, Dr. Edward Deming is a significant person in this story. This invitation went out from Jews society for him to visit Japan and share his knowledge. Now, Deming is a student of a well-known guru in quality called Walter Schuhart. Walter Schwartz is considered as the father of statistical quality control. He is the person who introduced a chart variety called control chart. He was working with Deming in Hawthorne. If you've heard of Hawthorne studies, it's the same factory. And Deming had visited Japan before as advisor to Supreme Command in 1946 during the wartime. And this was his second trip, and he had experience here. And so Kenichi Koenagi invited Deming to come to Japan. Deming, when he came back, what he taught the Japanese was what he learned from people like um, the uh, uh, the statistical quality control guru, that they learn the quality control aspects from in Hawthorne. And so the most of the training that he covered was mainly around statistical quality control. And during his visit, he stayed 70 days in Japan. He conducted a 8-day quality control course and a leadership course. And he did this free of charge. And during this program, there were a lot of people that got trained. Now, if you heard of people like Taguchi's, Ishikawa's son, Kaoru Ishikawa, everybody followed that program. And that is where all of them learned a lot of tools that you sometimes associate with Japanese. For example, Ishikawa's diagram, which you call as a fishbone diagram, was taught by Deming, which was cause and effect diagram. It's Ishikawa who popularized it in Japan, so it got famous as Ishikawa diagram. Similarly, if you've heard of things like 5S, which a lot of people call Japanese 5S, It was a methodology that Ford was following at that time called Kando: clean, arrange, neatness, organize, and so on. So it is a guy in that group called um, Hiroyuki Hirano who actually gave these Japanese terms, Japanese terms for 5S, and it got popular. If you take Sri Lankan context, to Sri Lanka, it was introduced by a Japanese called Taiki Akimoto. So we started calling it Japanese 5S here, but it is actually a US originated concept. PDCA is a concept taught by Deming. So a lot of things was passed on to the Japanese during this program. So they during the association made some money out of these programs. Even Deming did it free, and as a respect to Deming, they started awarding people for people who practice these concepts that Deming taught, and they started calling that award in honor of Deming as the Deming Application Prize. Till today, this prize is considered as the highest order of prize when it comes to quality in Japan. Right. So now we move on with the Toyota history. So Toyota, one of the significant individuals in Toyota development was its one of its engineers called Taichi Ono. Taichi Ono joined Toyota in 1932. So if you go back to the history, this is the time they were even under the Toyota automated handloom operation company. That is the time Taichi Ono joined Toyota Motor Company. Taichi Ono was a born by birth is a Chinese. He was uh, he had a good relationship with his father had a good relationship with Kichiro. So as a result, he got a job in Toyota, and that is how he ended up in Toyota. Now, Taichi Ono is the brainchild behind the entire Toyota production system as we know it today. Now, Taichi Ono also, like IG, remember, who took over from Kichiro, went to Ford to study the Ford operations. He also went to US in 1956. He also visited all these plants, and he even came across interestingly like supermarkets like US had that time called Piggly Wiggly. That is where he learned things like a supermarket system can if a supermarket can function based on filling up the racks based on the rate that customers take the goods out of the shelves. He was thinking, can't we do the same in manufacturing? So can we do the same thing in manufacturing? Maybe start manufacturing based on the same principles where we only manufacture when a customer place an order, not till that. So this Kanban principles and a lot of just-in-time principles was brought into uh, Taichi's mind actually through these visits and also from the teachings from uh, Dr. Edward Deming. Right. So, like Deming, who studied from Walter Schwartz in Hawthorne, who was which is the base for statistical control training he did. Another person who, at that time, was following his Walter Schwartz path was Juran. So I'm going to come to Juran in a while and just spend a little bit more time on Deming. So these are some of the pictures from the statistical quality control class Deming used to conduct in Japan, which is mainly the birth of most of the concepts that people follow in Japan today. And and some of the key contribution, if you know standards like ISO 9000, which is the most famous standard under ISO, it is actually built upon Deming's set of principles called 8 quality management principles. His plan, do, check, act actually is from his guru Walter Schwartz. It's something it's called the Schwartz cycle, which actually got promoted through Deming as PDCA. And also he had so many other things like 14 principles, Deming 7 diseases. So He's a considered one of the great gurus of quality, especially helped to for the complete evolution of and transformation of Japanese quality. So, like Sh- Deming, who learned from Schuhart, another uh, expert that visited based on a Jew's invitation was Joseph Juran. Now, Dr. Joseph Juran was famous for his thing called this quality triology. He was the one who was talking initially about breakthrough improvement. If you take your Mind Pro, you have a module on breakthrough improvement, and Dr. Harry has built upon breakthrough improvement module based on these Juran's principles. He was also the person who went on to talk a lot about cost of poor quality. Now, if you go through your Mind Pro, there are a lot of talk about how to use cost of poor quality to find out projects. So it's all coming from with the inspiration of Duran. And also, he was one of the guys who popularized the use of the Pareto principles found by Wilfredo Pareto. We will learn how about Pareto principle, how to draw Pareto charts, everything in the coming sessions. Right. And the story continues with Toyota. Now, there's this guy called Taichi Ono I mentioned was the brainchild behind a lot of things for Toyota's success. So, when you talk about Toyota's success, it was in 1965. Toyota went on to win that Deming Award, which was introduced in 1951 from the money that the Jews earned from Deming's lectures. So the 1965, when Deming award was won, they were not the first to win this, but after some time when Toyota won this, there was a lot of attention went towards Toyota manufacturing process. And there's another level of Deming Award. After 3 years, you can apply called Deming Grand Prize, and Toyota goes on to win that in 1970. So here's a company that's coming up in Japanese industries and getting known to be one of the best quality uh, companies. And unfortunately, in the world at that time, Japanese products were actually considered as low quality, cheap stuff. Um, but with this recognition that Toyota had, and more importantly, the event that happened after in 1973, Toyota, the lot of attention went towards Toyota. Now, Toyota in 1973, there's a significant thing happening in the world, which is the oil crisis. This oil crisis happened mainly because there was this Arabic countries started going against Israel, which had Jewish population, and there were countries that support Israel, and Japan being part of the American um, occupation, if you to say that, they all went on to support Israel's side of Israel. So all the Arabic countries started oil embargo on the countries that supported Israel. So as a result, the automobile industry started crashing down because the oil prices went up so high. And American big giants like Ford, General Motors, who were manufacturing vehicles, started losing money. And however, during this time, a company called Toyota was still making money because Toyota was manufacturing vehicles uh, at the lowest cost possible. Now, what do you mean by that? Toyota's philosophy is something to produce as cheapest possible, but at the same quality as the competition. So they try to minimize the cost as much as possible, but to produce something as good as the competition. So they tend to sell their products at the same price the competitors sell, but their production cost was way lower. So they had higher margins. And their models like Toyota Corolla at that time did very good on petrol. So because of that, in 1973, Toyota became one of the highlights in the world economy for its success during a very bad period. So then And that's the same time where attention went into their operation system, production system. Originally, because of this Ono's involvement as vice president engineering, Toyota's production system was called as Ono system, and different names there. But finally, Taichi Ono himself standardized the name, calling itself as the Toyota Production System by writing this book way back in 1973. So this is the second important source document for Toyota Production System. Now, what is Toyota Production System? It is based on two main principles, which is just in time and Jidoka. Now, what is just in time and what is Jidoka? Just in time is a concept that comes from Kichihiro. If you remember, Kichihiro Sakichi's son, the founder's son, went to Ford to visit US, and then also IG went to visit the Ford River Rouge plant. They saw that how the moving line assembly thing function works. However, one of the things that they realized is that in in those companies they had a lot of inventory, and but these guys didn't have Toyota didn't have that much of money to carry a lot of inventory. They couldn't keep a long lead time to manufacture vehicles because they wanted raw material to the final product cycle to become shortest, so they can earn money, sell the cars and earn money, so they can be cash rich. And they didn't have the US counterparts as machines way advanced than the Japanese companies. They had their machines were 8 times more efficient than the Japanese companies. Toyota, what Toyota actually had. So just in time is a principle where you only manufacture based on the rate of demand of the or rate of demand that you get using the shortest life cycle possible, and cutting down all the waste and variation in that process. So, uh, this concept, if you really look at, is nothing but drawn from Ford Motor Systems moving production line. That is one of the inspiration for them. But what they did, they came up with their own uh, additions to that to cut down waste, inventory, especially, and improve the flow of the system. And we're going to learn more about this. And then the second pillar of Toyota production system is called Jidoka. Jidoka is known as automation, not automation, automation. It's called automating with human touch. So as I told you, they didn't have much money in Toyota, and their machines were pretty old, and they had to make maximum out of the machines that they had. The founding father of Jidoka is generally called as Sakichi, the greatest inventor, the founding father of Toyota. So like Sakichi, the Japanese had to invent with their own machines and separate out what needs to be done by the machine, what needs to be done by the people, and try to see whether they can do small improvements with the money they had to improve their operation. By doing that, they came up with a lot of innovations. So these two concepts, one is manufacturing to reduce their lead time, cutting down waste, and adopting a production line at the rate of demand, which is called just in time, and automation, working on improvements based on understanding what is required, and also working on their production lines where they all use controls in such that they work in sequence. These two pillars were the main uh, things that Toyota actually looked at in terms of making things cheaper, which they call Ginka Taigen, and also improving human development, because they had to develop people to have continuous flow. So they had a target of having at least two resources as backup for every resource that they had. So these are the main two pillars that Taichi Ono and used as part of Toyota production system. But now, when we talk about lean as a concept, what the world knows today as lean is more about this thing called just in time, right? These are some of the other principles over here. The main two pillars are here. We've learned about Hajunka and all this in our program. But just to highlight on this, just in time is like 90% of the lean what we know today. Because if you know about Japan, if you've been to Japan, if you've been to a Toyota tour, what you generally see is they will take you. Actually, when you go to Japan, you can ask a hotel to take on a tour to Toyota Museum. And they also, if you have some connections with some industry, they will take you on an industry tour to Toyota. But what you will see? You will see how their continuous flow happening with assembly line operation, how they have minimized inventory, how they produce things based on the rate of demand. And they will also use in to do this, they do a lot of visualization techniques. In Japanese you call Mureka, and a lot of other activities like jikote kanketsu, which is means own process completion, where like you had this notion of take no defect, pass no defect. So so these things is what you will see. They will hardly reveal you stories, success stories about their automation effort, because most of the Japanese companies, they manufacture their own equipment. Now, for example, in Sri Lanka, there's a zipper manufacturing company called YKK. It's one of the leading zipper manufacturing companies in the world. I was lucky enough to be their consultant for ISO 9000, 14,000 OSHA's implementation. So I spent, I think, a very good amount of my youth at that factory. One of the things that uh, you realize is that over a period of time, all their machinery is manufactured in a YKK plant in somewhere in the world, and they do not provide insights about those machines, on how those robots work. The logic algorithms is never being shared. So why then people they allow people to come on tours? It's just to brand Toyota. What happens? You visit a company, see their manufacturing process, you go back to your country and start talking about that operation. In turns, it becomes a marketing effort. If you take countries like Japan, they've used brands like Toyota to brand their country. To come out of a situation in 1970s known to be a bad quality product manufacturing company to a high level, high end goods manufacturing country. Same if you can attribute to South Korea, what they did with Samsung. Now, Samsung started with initially phones, but 20 years down the line, before we were not even considering Samsung as a brand. But now, people they have used the Samsung brand on the other products. People buy Samsung laptops, Samsung that, Samsung this, and also they now attribute the same respect to the vehicles coming from South Korea. It's the same thing what the Japanese did over a period of time. So, but they never share this automation part. So most of the people who study out there in lean, they only talk about Toyota production system, mostly what's discussed in just in time. Now, how did the entire story of Toyota, who went from automated handloom machine manufacturing company to one of the automobile success stories in Japan, where got to came up with this Toyota production system, got popularized as lean. Now, that is the story we're going to listen now, right? Now, you might wonder, why is he going all about over and over again on Toyota? Tell us about lean. Here's the story about lean. Now, what happened in 1984? Now, America got to know these Japanese special this company is having something, and they wanted to learn what these guys are doing. And Toyota also wanted to expand. They were in America at that time, but they want to expand their operations in US. So in 1984, General Motors, one of the big automobile giants in US, started a joint venture with Toyota and started a plant called New United Motor Manufacturing Corporation in California. So these guys, they started this operation, and Nummi was a factory which was not doing great. Once Toyota took over, they started making profits. They started doing significant improvements. So one of the uh, engineers who was working in that plant was John Krafzik, the person over here. He was doing his master's at MIT Sloan University, and as part of his master's thesis, he wrote about the manufacturing operation that was happening in Nummi with after Toyota introduction. That was his thesis. So it was actually Toyota was trying to instill Toyota production system here, which was a brainchild of Chaiti Ono. But when he submitted his thesis, this was his thesis cover, in 1988, you can see he titled that thesis as Triumph of the Lean Production System, and he published a paper based on his thesis. You can download this, still available, called Triumph of the Lean Production System. So this was the first time in the history the word lean was used to explain Toyota production system. And this is where the word lean actually was born, uh, which got so popular thereon. And his research supervisor was James P. Womack. So James P. Womack further took this research, and with another group of people called Daniel T. Jones and Daniel Roos, went on to write a book called The Machine That Changed the World 2 years after this paper. And it was all about the Nummi's operation. And he says the story, lean production, Toyota's secret weapon in the global car wars that is revolutionizing world industry. So this became a world bestseller, and it popularized the word lean and lean management in the world. And he also went on to start an institute which used to do programs and conferences. So the concept started getting popular as lean in the Western world. So Toyota production system over a period of time, the Westerners started calling it lean because of this review that happened, and the world today call everything lean instead of Toyota. So Toyota production system and lean, it is not 100% match. As I told you, lean mostly talks about the just-in-time component of Toyota production system and little bit about the other things, especially very less about Jidoka. Lot of lean projects that people do does not have lot of automation aspects involved. It is more about just-in-time and concepts around that. So it is not 100% one-to-one with Toyota, but it's a concept derived out of Toyota production system. So this is how the lean word came into being, and this is the history of Toyota production system and lean. If you have any questions, I can take now.